A lot of SLPs have asked me why there isn't some kind of a standard language therapy curriculum. So, if you've ever had that question, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is that no standard language therapy curriculum exists for SLPs. But the good news is that you don't need one in order to help your students succeed. It's actually possible to help your students efficiently boost their language processing skills without requiring a scripted curriculum. And it's also possible to help your students succeed without hours of prep and planning. So let me take just a couple minutes and share how that is possible.
Now, I get why people want something scripted and specific that they can follow. On the surface, it seems like it could make life a whole lot easier. But that might not necessarily be the case. Curriculums may work fine for teachers because it's their job to deliver the curriculum. They are experts in knowing grade level expectations. But you, as the SLP, are not a teacher. You are a therapist, and therapy is individualized. That means that one size doesn't fit all. The problem with a curriculum is that no one cookie cutter play by play is going to work for your caseload. The problem is, starting from scratch with each case can mean a lot of work for you as the SLP when you have a caseload of 40, 60, 80, 100, or some other ridiculous number of students. If you work with pediatric populations, a good portion of your caseload is likely language cases. If planning for language therapy is sucking up a lot of your time, that can get stressful very quickly. So while SLPs can't have a curriculum, we can develop something else that is just right, a middle ground, something that's flexible enough that it meets your students' unique needs, but structured enough that you're not starting from scratch each time you get a new language therapy referral. The system that I've created does just that. Now, I developed this framework in the beginning of my doctoral work because I was frustrated with my lack of a good system for language therapy. I was tired of spending so much time planning and feeling like my students never made consistent progress. But within the first few years of working in the school systems, I joined the building problem solving team in my district. The purpose of this team was to field all the referrals for academic and behavioral concerns, and it consisted of a combination of different teachers from general education and special education, a building administrator, the psychologist, the social worker, and the speech language pathologist. So me. As I sat in on these team meetings, I noticed that most of the students referred for evaluations for academic issues had issues with vocabulary based on teacher reports and my language evaluations. At the time, I was doing a lot of research on response to intervention, literacy, and language in my doctoral program, and a lot of the literature I was reading pointed in the same direction. That's when I knew I was finally getting closer to finding that language therapy system that I'd been looking for. What I found when I dug into the research was that vocabulary skills were correlated with a lot of the big picture academic and language skills I'd been working on with my students. Things like reading comprehension, being able to make inferences, or being able to retell information they'd read. Even being able to compose written assignments with detailed and organized sentences. Vocabulary impacted them all. When it came to reading comprehension, I found that you need to know 90 to 95% of the words in a text in order to comprehend it. If you don't have that background knowledge of words in a text, you're going to miss the overall message because you get too bogged down trying to make sense of what the words mean or sound the words out. This sounded like the exact scenario that the teachers in my building would describe when making referrals to the team. Teachers would say things like, well, when I asked him questions about what he just read, he just gave me a blank stare. Or, we spent 30 minutes talking about the ghost in the attic story. Afterwards, I realized she was lost the entire time because she didn't even know what an attic is. Or people would say things like, well, they have a hard time coming up with the right word when they're explaining things to me, even words that I think most kids should know at their age. All of these kinds of things led me to create a language therapy system focused on one key area addressed systematically, instead of a bunch of random skills thrown around together out of sequence. This is what helped me get my students to their least restrictive environments consistently, and in some cases out of special education completely if it was appropriate. It's also what finally made me feel like a language therapy expert instead of a glorified teaching assistant or just the speech teacher. It's also what made me go from hating language therapy to making it my life's work. I created that system using a framework I refer to as the Essential Five. To understand the how and the why of the Essential Five, we need to talk about where vocabulary fits into the picture. I used to think that vocabulary was just about knowing definitions of words or being able to label and identify words. When we address vocabulary in a way that targets these five components, it can serve as a foundation for your language therapy. Vocabulary skills are what I like to refer to as the first domino. You want to think of more challenging skills like inferencing and high-level comprehension as dominoes that are further down the line. When we knock down the first domino, which is vocabulary, we make it much easier for all the other dominoes to fall. It doesn't mean we don't ever address them. We just don't want to address all the skills at once. Some kids will improve their overall processing skills without ever needing direct comprehension work from you in language therapy. Others might need this work eventually, but if you build a strong foundation first, they'll actually be able to respond to that type of work. The way we actually make those dominoes fall and improve vocabulary is that we need to develop a repertoire of strategies we can use to address all the skills that contribute to vocabulary knowledge. Then, once we've developed those protocols and established a simple set of materials we can use while implementing them, all we need to do is consistently cycle through them. This is what eliminates the overwhelm for you and at the same time focuses only on the skills students need in order to make consistent progress, instead of aimlessly jumping around from skill to skill, confusing your students, and overwhelming yourself. We want to think of vocabulary as an umbrella that includes all five of these things, and all five of these things impact each other as well as contribute to vocabulary growth and word knowledge, which contributes to improved comprehension and processing. The first linguistic component that impacts vocabulary is phonology, the study of a language's sound system. A lot of times we think of phonology under the realm of speech sound disorders, like having a disordered sound system and not pronouncing the words the right way. But it also contributes to vocabulary because we won't use a word often and effectively if we can't say it. Part of knowing a word is having a good phonological representation of a word. Part of our concept of a word's meaning comes from hearing all the sounds in the word together in sequence and recognizing them and putting the meaning behind what they all mean collectively together. When you put all those sounds together and grasp the meaning of the word, that's what happens when that phonological representation develops. Because our ability to use words depends on our phonological representation, we've got to make sure that we integrate a phonological component within the way we work on vocabulary in therapy. The second linguistic component in the Essential Five is orthography, the study of a language's spelling system. Orthographic knowledge is the awareness of how a word looks in print and the meaning behind how a word is spelled. If you have a weak orthographic representation of a word, that's going to impact how efficient you are when you're decoding. The ways words are spelled can also give key information to their meanings. In addition, there are also individual word parts that give us clues about the overall meaning as well, like prefixes and suffixes, which has to do with morphology, which is our next component. Part of word retrieval and recognition is being able to look at a word and recognize it automatically. When you're able to do that quickly and draw all of those associations, you have what's called a mental orthographic image. This is why integrating strategies that build these skills are so important in our vocabulary intervention, because we want to have that rapid recall and association. The third linguistic component in the Essential Five is morphology, the study of forms of words. The morphemes in a word will impact how a word is spelled. When we're talking about morphology, we're talking about the study of word parts, like prefixes, suffixes, roots, bases, and grammatical markers. All of these individual parts have meanings, and they also impact the overall words meaning. This means that if we change word parts, like a suffix, for example, we might change the meaning or a class of a word. Or, as another example, if we put a grammatical marker on the word, part of the word would remain the same, but we'd be getting information from that grammatical marker. Because all of these things give us crucial information about how to use words and what they mean, they all impact vocabulary, which is why it's important to target morphology. Linguistic component number 4 is semantics, which is what a lot of us think when we think of vocabulary. Semantics refers to meaning and the pieces of information associated with the word. Semantic features are different attributes that give us information about what words mean. For example, with the word cat, we might think of the category of an animal, or we might think of physical attributes like the fact that it's furry, or we might think of functions or things that a cat might do, like make a meowing sound. If we're studying things like verbs and adjectives, the semantic features we're talking about could be synonyms, antonyms, or associations. For our students with language disorders, they don't store semantic information as efficiently and automatically as other students. They need us to be a lot more direct and explicit with them when addressing things like semantics. This is why the standard instruction in the classroom is not enough for them. We need to take it a step deeper and be more direct with them when we're teaching semantic information compared to what other kids might need. And this is the case with all of the essential 5. The students on our caseload just need something that's a little bit more intensive and direct than the other students. The 5th linguistic component is syntax, the study of sentence structure. We're not going to develop deep knowledge of words if we don't use them consistently, and having a solid sense of sentence structure can help us do that. Vocabulary isn't just about what words mean, it's also about what words do. Knowledge of content words in a sentence is not enough. We also need to know the function of different sentence parts, as well as the function words in the sentences. This might include words like prepositions or conjunctions. Without understanding what those words are doing there and what they're telling us, comprehension is going to suffer. Function words are like the glue that holds the content words together, and that's why it fits in with vocabulary. We need these skills to be intact if we're going to understand the overall message. This is why kids aren't likely to respond to strategies focused on high-level comprehension if they can't comprehend individual sentences. So now that we have all the pieces, we can start putting them together to create that domino effect that I was talking about, where we knock down vocabulary and it starts to knock down the other things, those other language skills further down the line.
Now, if you found this video helpful so far and you want to learn how to apply the entire Essential 5 framework for language therapy to your practice, then I invite you to check out my entire presentation where I outline the research behind this system, why it works, and the key components that you need in order to start creating your system. So on this presentation, I'm going to cover the one area that you need to focus on that really forms the basis for your framework, as well as those components that fit under it that are going to inform what strategies that you use in your treatment. And then I'll also talk about some common mistakes that SLPs make when planning language therapy and how you can avoid making them. So it's going to be possible for you to get better results by focusing on fewer things that give you the biggest bang for your buck in therapy and help you to create consistent change in your students' performance without requiring hours of prep and planning on your part. So all you need to do to check out that presentation is go to drkarenspeech.com/language therapy. Again, that's drkarenspeech.com/language therapy to check out that free online presentation.